One of the things that is on everyone's mind is brain health. I know it's on my mind. And although neurotherapy and scars and injuries are not directly related to dementia, this is really the final common pathway that chronic stress and chronic inflammation are leading us. As we think about our plans for the future, one of the things we need to do is protect our brains. So I'm compelled to mention Bruce Willis because, Bruce Willis was one of those people who I would go see in any movie. I just liked watching his charisma on stage and on screen. And it was such a sad moment when I learned that he was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. What I learned about this gentleman doing some research into his background was that as a young man, he had a stutter. And I did a search to see if stuttering is linked to dementia in any of the scientific journals that are in the database we call PubMed. Any peer-reviewed literature linking what they call neurogenic stuttering to degenerative brain disease later in life. And I found no mention of it. But the other interesting thing about Bruce Willis is that he worked as a private investigator before he auditioned for Moonlighting, where he played a private investigator. I read that he beat out over 3,000 other people for the role, so he was destined for that. Incidentally, he was born in Idar Oberstein in Germany. His parents were German and American, so he's another World War II baby. But frontotemporal dementia is, forgive the pun, a very hard way to die because it's one of the most aggressive of the dementias. It progresses very quickly compared to Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, or vascular dementia, any of the other causes of degenerative brain disease. And one of the things that is the hallmark of these diseases, this family of conditions, is the accumulation of these proteins. One is called beta amyloid, and it forms these sticky plaques in the brain that accumulate and seem to be linked to the severity of dementia. And this protein called tau, which forms what are called neurofibrillary tangles. So again, you have this debris that is accumulating in a brain because presumably there's an imbalance between the forces that create wastes and the systems that clean them up. So recognizing that this represents an imbalance between the forces that cause disease and the body's ability to heal itself, we look to mechanisms to try to understand why does this happen and ask ourselves how we can fix it. So very clearly it's linked to mitochondrial disease. It's linked to neuroinflammation. It's linked to an excess of oxidative stress in the brain. These are buzzwords that you can look up on your own time if you haven't heard them before, but they're the mechanisms that underlie so many of the chronic diseases. But in this case, they happen to target the function of the housekeeping cells in the brain called microglia. And this is important because microglia are felt to be key players in understanding how the brain shifts from a stress mode to a healing mode, from a pro-inflammatory state to an anti-inflammatory state. And that's very closely linked to the autonomic nervous system. And that's important because the autonomic nervous system is linked to stress and the fight or flight response. And we think that blockages, scars, wounds that persist in some cases after any injury or stress, whether it's a broken bone, a surgical wound, an animal bite, a recurrent infection, a sprain or strain, an injury that never fully healed for whatever reason, can become a focus of tension, inflammation, and stress. And the theory is that these points of noise, these disturbed circuits in the nervous system, contribute to a total load on an ongoing basis of what we call chronic sympathetic activation. So while there's no clear link between interference fields, between fractures, between these specific injuries and dementia, if the blockage hypothesis is correct, then treating our blockages represents a very good approach to improving brain health. And my mandate is to put numbers behind those claims, to measure outcomes in real people who are treating blockages and tracking their progress. But if you're interested in brain health, one of the questions you may be asking yourself is, how can I tell if I'm at risk of dementia, or how can I tell if I have it? And this is a big marketplace because right now there are PET scans that target the imaging of tau and amyloid. And these can be used to identify the total burden of tau and amyloid in your brain many years before you develop symptoms. So they might be a very helpful tool for early diagnosis. There's also a blood test called GFAP, glial fibrillary acidic protein, and measuring levels of serum GFAP may be another way to identify dementia years before you develop symptoms. But here's the thing, the focus on these proteins that collect in the brain, the waste products that seem to be associated with the progression of the disease, they may just be the forest for the trees. They may be a red herring completely, because the thing that causes dementia may have nothing to do with these proteins. It may be that the underlying problems that cause dementia also cause the accumulation of these plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. So although there's a lot of reason to be hopeful about the future treatment for dementia, it's so important for every person who wants to take ownership of their own health, take ownership of their life, to think about brain health as one of the most important priorities over the long term.